I took a stand with the Arabs a very long time ago. At the age of 21, in fact, more than half a lifetime ago. I made a stand with the Palestinian people, and I'm still standing there. I had the good fortune to be befriended by the late President Yasser Arafat.
القدس هي عاصمة دولة فلسطين، شاء من شاء وأبى من أبى.
I made a long and bitter stand with the people of Iraq against sanctions, occupation, and war.
We're not walking away until our mission is done, until the invader is out of Kuwait.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أيها الشعب العظيم.
شاهد فأن الإرسال للتلفزيون الرسمي العراقي.
We have no ambition in Iraq.
I stood with the people of Lebanon against Israeli invasion and occupation. I stood with Syria and Libya against sanctions and ostracism. I stood with the people of Sudan against those who would tear the country down. My name is George Galloway. Well, I was born in an Irish immigrant quarter in a Scottish city called Dundee on the northeast coast of the country. My mother's side of the family were Irish immigrants, my father Scottish farm workers, labourers. It was a poor background, but very happy. I was born into what we call an attic, which is the top part of a roofed building, sloping roof. It was so small that I had to sleep in a drawer. At the age of 4, I moved into a council house, the public authority housing, which was like a dream come true for us, to have an inside toilet and a front and back garden. And I lived in Dundee until I was 28 years old. I was born into a left-wing, progressive, working-class household, encouraged to read, given lots of books. And so I was always the kid in the school who knew who the president of such and such a country was, or who was the king of this country. And at a very early age, I became involved in politics. My father was a union official with the engineering union. My mother was active in the Labour Party. So I was out working in elections since I was knee-high. And at the age of 13, 2 years earlier than one is allowed to, but I looked older than my age then and now, and I joined the Labour Party. So I was a member of the Labour Party from the age of 13 until I was expelled over the Iraq War. So I was a member for 36 years, and I was expelled in 36 seconds, roughly, which was a very hard thing to suffer, but I'm over it now. I always intended to have, and have had, I'm very lucky, a political life. I never wanted to be a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer or anything else other than a political activist, and I've been lucky my whole life, more or less. I was able to do that. I left school at 17. I didn't go to university. I went to work in a factory making tires, Michelin tires. And I did so because I wanted to enter the trade union movement and the working class movement. And although it's not a course I advise others, it worked for me. It was part of my worldview that we were with the Palestinians, with the Arabs, because we were on the side of the revolution and against reaction and against imperialism. So it was always a part of my worldview. I was never at any time in any doubt what side I was on, but I had never met an Arab. I had never obviously visited the Middle East. I had never met a Muslim of any kind. And in the midsummer of 1975, when I was 21 years old, just under 21, someone came to the door of the Labour Party office in Dundee, where I was alone, and I almost didn't answer the door because I was busy printing leaflets in the old-fashioned way, turning a handle, printing them one by one. But something, Kismet, made me answer the door. And there was a handsome young Palestinian student who told me that he'd come from the General Union of Palestinian Students, and he wanted to talk to the leaders of the party about Palestine. I told him, there's no leaders here, but you can talk to me, and I will tell them. And at the end of those 2 hours, imagine, just by chance, he described the tragedy that had befallen the Palestinian people, their condition, in such a mesmerizing way that by the end of that 2 hours, I was a signed up member of the Palestinian resistance. Within 2 years, I went there. I went to Beirut. I went with a delegation of people. I met with President Arafat. He liked me. He told me to stay. And I might have stayed all my life there, actually, because I had a Palestinian girlfriend who had a rifle, a Kalashnikov over her shoulder. I used to meet her every day coming from the Arab University. We used to sit in the cafes and go to meetings, and I stayed there many months. Beirut in 1977 was a very revolutionary place. I knew that these people were not terrorists, that on the other hand, they were the victims of terrorism. So when I used to hear about terrorist bases being bombed, I knew that they were referring to refugee camps, which I knew well. and in which I knew many people, many families. So it became personal. And then I was offered a job with the Labour Party back in Britain. And I went to ask his advice. And my inclination was to stay. My heart was there in every sense. But he told me, no, you must go. You can become one of the biggest voices for us in the world. He had great faith in me, I must say. And I always feel he's on my shoulder. And he kissed me on the head. He said, goodbye, you have to go. He said, if I see you around the streets, I'll have you shot. So you have to leave. But for that, I might well have stayed in Beirut in the 1970s. You might never have heard of me. I might have died in any of the battles in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond. But again, it was kismet. But I came back determined to continue my work on Palestine, and I have.
يبدو أن حياة الفلسطينيين أصبحت لجوءا بعد لجوء.
ماذا ينتظر العالم حتى يتدخل بشكل جدي؟
غزة في قلب النار الإسرائيلية.
Israel's war on Gaza continues.
61,000 Palestinian homes were destroyed in 22 days. And not a single brick, not a hammer, not a piece of wood, not an ounce of aid has been allowed to cross that border in all of that time.
Action speaks louder than words. Viva Palestina! Viva Palestina! Viva Palestina! Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much.
I was marching on the 10th of January to the Israeli embassy, which we did every day during the Gaza war, and I decided that, you know, action speaks louder than words. So I announced on that day that I would soon lead a convoy all the way from London to Gaza. That was on the 10th of January, which was a Saturday. I started the work on the Monday. And 4 weeks later, we left England with 300 British citizens, 110 British vehicles. The value of the whole thing was about £1.5 million. We drove through Europe, through North Africa. We got Morocco and Algeria to open their border. For the second time in 17 years, both times for me, first for the bus in '99 and then for the convoy in 2009. It wasn't an easy journey. Traveling with 300 people who've never, many of them, been out of their own country before, of all different points of view, even religiously, and getting through all these countries whose governments largely didn't really want to have us there, but couldn't really say so, but wanted us on our way as quickly as we could. I must say, in honesty, though I'm not a supporter of Colonel Gaddafi at all, the only place where we were really welcome by the government and the people was Libya. And the son of Gaddafi himself said, "How many vehicles do you have?" I said, 110. He said, "Now you have 220. He doubled the size of the convoy. In fact, we found it difficult to get out of Libya, such was the welcome, the warmth of the welcome there, from the official circles and from the masses. When we arrived in Egypt, we discovered we were now the guests of the ruling party in Egypt. I knew that was important because, hey, they win all the elections in Egypt. And people asked me, "Why did you go this long way around?" I told them I wanted to give the government of Egypt plenty of time to think about us. And it worked. We became their guest. They told us we were their guests, but that didn't stop us being attacked under the gaze of hundreds of Egyptian policemen in Al Arish. We still had that night at least 20% of our goods taken off us by the Egyptian police forces. The second time with the United States was worse. They kept us waiting for 12 days. They did not allow us to take one vehicle, even though we had bought those vehicles in Egypt, precisely for the purpose of carrying our aid in. They made us carry the medical aid through the border with the US delegation. But the British convoy got through with virtually everything intact.
Welcome to Palestine!
From Ireland.
We love you so much!
Thank you very much.
We decided that this Viva Palestina idea should be spread around the world. So the American convoy took place on the 4th of July, American Independence Day. There's another joint British and American one that took place on the 27th of December to coincide with the anniversary of the war. If I never walk in free Palestine, I hope that my son, Zainuddin, George Galloway, will. And if he does, I hope that people tell him they remember his father. I think Zionism has been disastrous for the Jewish people as well as the Arabs and the Palestinians. It has transformed the popular image of Jews from the people of Einstein to the people of Sharon and Olmert and Netanyahu. And that's a very big degradation in their image. Albert Einstein himself was offered the first presidency of Israel and he refused. He said, I could never be the president of a country whose future was based on the ruined past of another people. I could never be the president of a country whose future happiness was based on the misery of the people whose land it was. They don't quote that very often, but he was one of the greatest Jews who ever lived. And Zionism is a racist ideology on two levels. First of all, it implies a superiority over the Palestinians whose land that they have taken. And second, it assumes that Jews can never live in their own countries. French Jews can never be French. British Jews can never be British, or American Jews, Americans. This is both offensive to the Jews in these countries and to the others in these countries. It implies that anti-Semitism, racism, is an endemic condition in the European or North American populations, and that's just not true.
This person needs no introduction, but I'll try to introduce him anyway. This is a man, I believe, if he was politically expedient, he could have been a cabinet minister, if not definitely something more. But principles matter, and this man epitomizes what principle, drive, and passion can do. Without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, George Galloway, MP for Bethnal Green and Burr.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Chair, Mr. Zabadny, distinguished elders, brothers, sisters, comrades, and friends, wa assalamu alaikum. I've been quite emotional, actually, in the course of this meeting today. I'm speaking in public virtually every day, virtually every night. And sometimes it's duty that I have to perform. But tonight I've been filled with a mixture of pride and happiness. I don't know where to start. What we need at this hour is to break the siege of Gaza. Because for all the destruction that we saw, that you've seen on your televisions, that we saw in some of those pictures, worse, much worse, is the siege. It's the breaking of the siege. And we have to break that siege every week and every month. And when the siege is over, the Palestinian people can begin to live. So you have to help us. The police attacked us. The police arrested our people on the way. We spoke to many people, but the conversation that will remain with me forever was with a young girl who said the following to me, and she said it twice, but the second time I had to turn my face away because I couldn't look her in the eye. She said, "Where is the Arab world, this great Arab world that they teach us about in school? Where are the Muslims? Where is the Ummah that they teach us about in the mosques? Why did they leave us alone? Why did they leave us to face this alone?" Well, I'm determined, as I hope you are determined, that they will never be able to say that about the London Borough of Tower Hamlets. We will never leave them alone. We will never leave them alone. I would like to be born in the future when exploitation and occupation and division and war were things of the past. And when men and women could realize their full potential, wherever they were born, in whatever circumstances. My name is George Galloway. The Arabs entered my bloodstream in Beirut in 1977 and never left. I loved the food, the music, the culture, the etiquette, the way of life. I loved everything about it. I'm not some kind of Orientalist, but I'm with justice and with right, and that places me in the position I'm in. I don't look at life on the basis of countries. My daughter asked me when she was very young, which country are we from? Are we Irish? Are we Scottish? Are we English? I told her our country is the future. And this is how I look at life. I have much more in common with a Tunisian who thinks like me than with a British person who doesn't. Just because I have the same passport as Tony Blair, I have nothing else in common with him, nothing at all. I had a whole pantheon of heroes, from Ho Chi Minh, who was fighting the Americans as I grew up, and that was my first campaigning efforts against the Vietnam War. Che Guevara, he remains a great hero for me. I was lucky enough in my life to become a friend of Fidel Castro, a friend of Che Guevara's daughter, his son. I lived next door to his son in Cuba. I was active in support of Cuba, and in the early 1980s, I met Fidel Castro for the first time. And I'm the author of the Fidel Castro Handbook. Once I did a TV program with him, which lasted from 5 o'clock in the afternoon to midnight. And it only stopped because the cameraman fell off his chair asleep. Or Fidel would have continued. And later I thought no one could possibly watch a TV program that long, but every person in Havana the next day stopped me to say that they'd been watching this program.
America.
It was a good, brave header as well. Equaliser against Barcelona in front of 60,000.
Yes, he said that. Literally seconds later, he landed this decent ball in as well. And it was a short corner. They just didn't get out quick enough for Barcelona. It was a
time with Jason and myself then. George Galloway's coming up after the news at 10. George, very good evening to you. What you got?
We're talking about child abuse and then followed on by knife crime. And of course, how can we ignore the elephant that's sitting in the corner of the room, the by-election disaster in Norwich, posing a new crisis for the Prime Minister. So lots to talk about, political as well as social. And it's all coming up over the next 3 hours. 08717 223344. There's certainly no other political figure in Britain who faces the public in one way or another in the numbers that I do every week. So I have my finger on the pulse when things are going our way and when things are going against them. I can tell because you can feel it in the airwaves. Welcome to the mother of all talk shows with me, George Galloway. We've got quite a show for you tonight. In fact, it's the mother of all talk shows. I had never visited Iraq before 1993, and I wouldn't have been welcome if I had, because I was a known opponent of the Saddam Hussein regime, opposed their war with Iran. I was, of course, opposed to the crazy idea of invading and occupying Kuwait, but I was against the idea of killing Iraq's children because of a falling out between the Western powers and the president of Iraq, who had previously been their best friend and who had been fueled in his war against Iran. There was mass starvation in Iraq when I arrived there in '93. I heard a woman give birth by cesarean section without anesthetic. I heard the sounds from outside the labor ward. I never heard anything like it in my whole life. And I threw myself into the fight against sanctions. I tried so hard to, first of all, lift the embargo on the basis that an Iraqi child was dying every 6 minutes of every day and night, dying before she even knew she was an Iraqi, but for no other reason than that she was, and that she had the misfortune to be born in Iraq at that time. I set out from London in 1999 to drive a red London bus all the way from Big Ben to Baghdad. It was set up in the name of Mariam Hamza, who was a small child I discovered in the Saddam hospital in Baghdad, just days away from death from leukemia. We brought her to Britain, restored her to health. Her hospital bill was paid for by the now King of Saudi Arabia. I had the responsibility to pay this child's medical bills, and I had no money. And I must say, in fairness to him, he didn't allow me more than 30 seconds to explain the situation. He put up his hand and said, "Consider this hospital bill paid." It was a very noble thing for him to have done. And then we decided to lead this convoy to Baghdad to draw attention to all the other Mariams who were perishing in Iraq. "10 years is long enough. No more sanctions. Let the Iraqi people live." All aboard for Baghdad. Bye. All aboard. we arrived in Baghdad, 3 million Iraqis came onto the streets to receive this bus. It's the biggest welcome for any British people in any country ever in all history. It was completely unforgettable. I was attacked, of course, at the time and subsequently for doing this. Saddam Hussein was said to have given me millions of pounds. In fact, he never gave me 1 cent. But the newspapers who claimed that he gave me millions of pounds, they, in the end, had to give me millions of pounds, alhamdulillah. The Oil for Food program is run not from Baghdad, but from the United Nations building in New York. And anyone receiving funds under the Oil for Food deal receives it from the United Nations' own bank account. And so it will be very simple indeed to establish whether a single brass farthing of the Oil for Food money ever came to me or our organization.
We will be using a timing system today, Mr. Galloway. We have 10 minutes.
I told the US Senate, everything you said about Iraq turned out to be wrong, and everything I said about Iraq turned out to be right. So how dare you sit in front of me? You want to put me on trial? It's me who should be putting you on trial. Senator, in everything I said about Iraq, I turned out to be right and you turned out to be wrong. You are trying to divert attention from the crimes that you supported, from the theft of billions of dollars of Iraq's wealth. Have a look at the real Oil for Food scandal. Have a look at the 14 months you were in charge of Baghdad, the first 14 months, when $8.8 billion of Iraq's wealth went missing on your watch. I never profited by 1 cent, not 1 cent. On the contrary, I gave my life's blood for this cause to try to draw attention to the sanctions which were massacring the children of Iraq. Little did we know that just 4 years later, an even bigger massacre would occur.
I want Americans and all the world to know that coalition forces will make every effort to spare innocent civilians from harm. We have no ambition in Iraq except to remove a threat and restore control of that country to its own people.
I will not apologize for removing Saddam Hussein.
Toppling Baghdad will just be the beginning of years of bloodshed and horror and war.
Britain is a European country, and it's about time it realized it and accepted it and played its full part in Europe. And I would hope that Europe could develop a political weight commensurate with its economic and cultural weight, which is considerable. And if it did, I would hope it would play a better role in the Middle East rather than being the tail of the American dog, which is what the role of the Europeans largely has been. I think that Mr. Blair was and is a kind of crazed evangelical exporter of the neocon, neoliberal method. I once asked him why he was following Bush in such a way. He said that our strategic relationship with the United States allows us to punch above our weight. It's a boxing metaphor, that you can punch harder than your weight would necessarily imply. But in truth, the special relationship was much more like the one that Miss Lewinsky had with President Clinton. It was very undignified, very one-sided. And I could go on, but it's Arab television, so I won't continue the metaphor.
Out! 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 Sony! Out! Sony! Out! Sony! 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 Out! Out! Out!
Respect is the political party which grew out of the anti-war movement. I had been expelled from the Labour Party over things I said on Abu Dhabi television. And so I was in Parliament, sitting as an independent. And I decided with my friends that here we had a mass movement in the country with no political reflection in the Parliament. The Parliament was in a bubble. The people outside, even before they found out what they now know, that it had all been a big lie, the whole Iraq story, they decided that they were being ignored and they needed a political voice. I became the only left of Labour member of Parliament to be elected to the British Parliament in England in 60 years, when I defeated one of the big figures in New Labour at the election in 2005.
I do hereby declare that George Galloway is duly elected a Member of Parliament for Bethlehem Borough.
Mr. Blair, this is for Iraq. This defeat that you have suffered and all the other defeats that New Labour has suffered this evening is for Iraq. All the people you killed, all the lies you told have come back to haunt you.
Subsequently, we have elected some 20 members of local councils throughout the country, and when the general election comes, we hope to go from one member of Parliament to 3. 2 in my area of East London,